Hello everybody and welcome back to Sin City Living and today's episode of The Darker Side of Vegas, where I talk about true crime from here in Vegas or Nevada. And as usual, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. We have a ton of content coming out for you guys every single day. You don't want to miss a single thing. Stay tuned for our premiere episodes on Thursdays at 6 o'clock with live chat with us here at Sin City Living. Chance to just BS with us, ask us any questions, give us video suggestions. We get a lot of them every single time. I'm on that one every single Thursday. I also do one on Tuesdays at 4:30. So far I haven't missed one yet, but on the off chance that work or something interferes, I will definitely go back through and read the chat logs as well. But please tune in for these. Come talk with us. And we want to thank our patrons as usual, and hope you guys are enjoying the Patreon only videos that we're putting out for you guys every single week. And we've just started putting out the entire how to deal dice, how to deal craps course. We're putting them out 2 videos a week, so it could take a little while because this is a very, very, very long course. Learning how to deal craps takes 3 or 4 months for most people to learn. The short side, 1 to 2 months. And if you're curious about it, go ahead and check the description of the video down below. And we also want to make sure that we thank Wes and everybody else that has dropped us a tip during these live chats. It's just going to help us get to the live stream so much faster. Definitely looking forward to that. We want to do it as soon as we can. Live streaming, doing some craps tournaments with some of our fans dialed in so that you guys are the players. Should be a lot of fun. We're already getting some good ideas for some prizes for this, because we definitely want to have prizes for it. And we'll probably also do maybe a Pie Gower Blackjack tournament for our Patreon fans as well. And yeah, really excited to do live streams. Once we can live stream, it just opens. The sky is the limit for what we can do. We're really looking forward to doing all of that stuff. So many different things we can do. Unfortunately, when I first set up this channel, I didn't think about live streams when I was getting all the equipment, and the camera that we have right now won't work for live streaming, so we have to upgrade our equipment. That's what's taking us so long to pull this off. But we're very excited to do it, and we're going to do it as soon as we can. I absolutely promise you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun to be able to do these. And otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and get into today's episode. And today's episode is going to be on the Biker Bandit. Any of you guys that have been to Vegas, lived in Vegas, may have heard about this. If you lived in Vegas, you probably heard about it, especially during that time period. It was pretty famous when it occurred, simply because of how brazen this person was. His name is Tony Carleo. Now, Tony was he's an interesting guy. He didn't originally live in Vegas. He wasn't from here, but he did like to gamble. He had the bug, and from all accounts, and I'll get into it a little bit later, he still has the bug in a little bit of a way. So he definitely had the gambling bug. Now, there's no way to know for sure whether or not this particular story is true, but he has told the story of how when he was on one of his trips out to Vegas, he watched a guy turn $5 into $50,000, and that experience and watching it just kind of put the what if in him of what if I was getting those kind of tips? What if that money was being pushed to me? You know, it looks so easy. It's just that simple. And the way he puts it is he looked at that, and here's what happened. So basically, it was an absolutely insane parlay. For anybody that watches craps or plays craps, basically this player did a multiple parlay. He had a $5 hard 8. It hit, he parlayed it to $50. It hit again, he parlayed it to $500. It hit again, he parlayed it to $5,000. And amazingly enough, it hit again, and this time he took it down, $50,000 and down. So he was at a higher limit table as well. There's not too many places here in Vegas that would let you do a $5,000 hard 8. So he was on a high limit table, and the odds of this happening are just astronomically slim. I mean, not only do you have to worry about the 7, you have to worry about all the 4 easy 8s that can come up as well. So looking at 10 out of the 36 combinations of the dice, that would take this bet down, and somehow it didn't happen. And I mean, every dealer has seen it. I've seen a hard 6 hit 3 times, twice back to back. I have seen hard ways hit 4 times without a 7 coming, but I've never seen anyone do a parlay, take me down. That's pretty crazy. So Tony saw this, and the way his mind worked is he looked at this and he went, wow, it's that easy. Anybody can make that kind of money if they have the balls to put themselves out there. He didn't look at it as, oh my God, this was an incredible hit. Like, what are the odds? That's just awesome. You know, hey, congratulations. Or, wow, talk about a gamble. Or, wow, that's like hitting the lottery. No, he looked at it as this person had the balls to put themselves out there, and it paid off. That's how he looked at this. And he probably looked at it that way because when he saw the $5,000 sitting on the table and the player still hadn't taken this back off of a $5 bet, that definitely takes some big brass ones. You know, you could definitely hang them up over the door of a pawn shop. They're just big, and that's what he thought is you know, if he could do it, I could do it, kind of thing. But not the gamble, but the put themselves out there, the just go for it. So many years later, Carleo did a couple things. First, he robbed the Stardust poker room cashier. And I believe it was the Stardust. Let me double check that. No, I'm sorry, not the Stardust, the Suncoast. He robbed the Suncoast poker room cashier. And the reason that he chose that one is from his I guess research or what he was looking at. That cashier, that cage that he robbed was about 20 yards, 20 feet. I think it was 20 yards from, 20 yards from, or maybe it was less. Okay. Anyway, it was very close to a side exit that was off a side street that he was able to park his motorcycle at. So that's why he chose that particular location, the Suncoast. Now, that successful robbery didn't net him a whole lot of money. It got him $19,000, and that's in 2010. It's about $19,000 in today's money. I mean, it's not idiotic amounts of money. And what it did was, it emboldened him. It made him more confident. It made him more cocky. He was more convinced that he had it, that he could do this, that this was doable, this was easy. But he wanted to take it up a notch. So in 2010, 5 days after he did the Suncoast robbery, and this is December 2010, he went, of all places, to Bellagio. He went to the Bellagio, and he parked his bike out front, kind of tucked away, backed it in so the front tire was facing out and facing on his escape route, and he brazenly walked in. And this is one of the things that does boggle my mind a little bit on this, is the fact that he walked in with his full biker leathers, gloves, and his bike helmet on with the visor down, and nobody said anything. Nowadays, that wouldn't draw quite the same eye, just because of the whole mask mandates and things. Where, 10 years ago, walking around with a mask on would have raised some eyebrows. Now, obviously not. My suspicion is with this, the reason that nobody said anything was because he was just walking through. They probably figured he was going to his room, going to check in. I know if he was actually at a table, they would have had him take the helmet off. But he walked in, and he even was able to nod and wave to the security guard that was at the front door. And so he walks in, and he goes to, now he stays along the wall, and he keeps himself as tucked out of the way as he can as he walks around, and he goes to Bellagio's high-limit craps table. And when he gets within about 20 yards, he starts running up there. And he pulls out the gun that he had in his pocket. Now, Carleo says, and from what I've read, I actually kind of believe this, that he had no intention of hurting anybody. He didn't want to hurt anybody. He wasn't planning. Had absolutely no desire to use that gun. But he also does say that if you have a gun, it's got bullets in it. Otherwise, it's just a paperweight. So he was prepared for sure. But he goes running up to the table with the gun out, yelling, move, and moves everybody out of the way. And he had a backpack on backwards, so it was on his front, and he just started shoveling chips into this backpack. He just started filling up. He's just grabbing chips, shoving them in, grabbing chips, shoving them in, grabbing chips, shoving them in, just trying to fill it up as fast as he can. Now, after a few minutes, he starts getting, or not after a few minutes, after a few seconds, he's starting to get nervous. Now, he had all these grandiose plans. Let me look at this again. He had all these huge plans, because he wasn't just going to hit this up. He was also going to go rob the poker room, and then he was going to do a smash and grab at their Cartier shop, their high-end watch shop. He had all these ideas, but the adrenaline and the fear started to kick in after just a few seconds, and kind of the fight or flight response ended up sort of kicking in. So instead of following up and going and doing more robberies, which honestly, if he would have done that, he probably would have been caught and probably would have failed. Security, all the casinos do have armed security even back then. So if he'd have tried to go from here to another location, rob there, and go to another location, he probably would have ended up shot. So instead, he turned and he ran and he bolted. Now he says, and I believe him, that the running part was the scariest thing for him. As he's trying to run towards the entrance, because now the visor, the helmet that he's using to disguise himself is now a hindrance. These full biker leathers with the gloves on, really hot. He's out of shape, or he's not in great shape. He's not out of shape. I mean, he was a pretty athletic looking guy, but he's running and it's getting super hot. He's wearing this helmet and it's restricting his view. He doesn't know if anybody's coming from the side to tackle him, try and be a hero. He knows nothing. So he's just running, about 200 yards. And he's also got an old knee injury, and that makes it even more difficult. Again, all these layers of clothes on. It's just, he says it felt like he was running through the surf. And in fact, as he got closer to the door, one of the valet attendants did kind of jump in his way as if they were going to try and stop him. But he presented the gun, and they wisely fell back and let him go on his way. So he runs out, jumps on his bike, and tears away. Now, he knew that this robbery just completely eclipsed everything he did at the Suncoast. I mean, again, it was $19,000 that he made. But what he did not realize was just how much it had eclipsed that robbery. He had the Suncoast robbery. He made $19,000. The Bellagio robbery, he pulled away over $1.5 million in chips. Now, that sounds like a whole ton of money, but there were going to be some issues with this. Now, Carleo found himself in this situation really through, you could say, I mean, you definitely would have to say entirely his own fault, decisions he had made. He had quite a lot of people in his life and in his background that would be perfect role models for him, people that he could look up to. His father was a sitting judge in Nevada at the time of the robbery. He was actually living in his father's house at the time. His uncle was very successful, his brother was very successful, or his stepfather, I'm sorry, not his brother, his stepfather. They were all very successful, they were all hardworking. He was a little bit too lazy for this. Now, he had a number of failed ventures throughout his life. He started out in Colorado and doing the same things. He was just always looking for the get-rich-quick scheme. He also started to develop a drug habit. OxyContin was his primary drug, although he did also use cocaine and other drugs. Now, eventually, he took his money and he plowed it all into real estate and rental properties, thinking that this would be a great chance for him to make some money. Now, unfortunately, he signed a lot of variable mortgages, basically the balloon mortgages with balloon payments. So at first it was very cheap, and he figured he would be fine because once he started renting and started pulling in this income, when the payments ballooned up, he'd be fine. He'd be able to afford it. He needed the first couple of years of the lower payments. Well, unfortunately, what ended up happening to him, as we all remember, the 2008 crash. So when the real estate market crashed, he found himself severely underwater, massively underwater. He eventually ended up having to declare bankruptcy, let a number of his properties get foreclosed on. So he ended up selling all of his remaining possessions and scraped together about $30,000. And he used that to move back to Las Vegas, moved in with his father, and he intended to go to school. He signed up for classes at UNLV. He eventually wanted to be a doctor. And he even had a photograph of his cousin, that was dead from an overdose, that died from overdose, framed up as an attempt to keep him straight, even though, again, he himself was a drug addict. So he was doing the best he could. Loneliness was really hitting him. He was always a very personable guy, so he was feeling lonely, he was feeling a little bit depressed, feeling a little bit stressed. And then what ended up happening was basically winter break. This was right before the robberies. Winter break happened, and things got worse for him because now he didn't have school to distract him. He didn't have classes to go to. He didn't have homework to do, studying to do. He was by himself. Again, loneliness was just crushing down on him. Nothing to do. So he kind of assuage that loneliness by going to casinos, which is something that I see a lot as a dealer. Is casinos are very, very social. You sit down even at a blackjack table and you're talking to people around you. You're talking to the dealer. It's a social atmosphere. You go to craps, even more social. Poker can be cutthroat, but it can also be very, very social. So casinos are definitely a social creature in and of themselves. So he started spending more and more time in the casinos. He went and he pulled out the what remaining money he had left, and unfortunately he's not a very good gambler. He really wasn't. So first he got his butt kicked to poker, then he got his butt kicked to blackjack, and then next thing you know, he's broke. In hours he lost $6,000. By the end of the day, he lost all of his money. He lost every penny, and he was desperate. So he starts calling people he knows. He's trying to sell his OxyContin just to get some money. He eventually got somebody to buy a little bit of it, about $800 worth of it, and that was just about the only money he had. Now, a few nights later, he gets a text message that invited him to a poker game at the Suncoast. Now, he played a lot, so it's probably from a host or a poker host or something along those lines. Now, he couldn't afford to play in the poker tournament, so he robbed it. Okay, that was his plan. So he was in and out super fast with the 19,000, and after that, he was emboldened. He thought he had it. Thought it was fine. So 5 days later, he hit the Bellagio, and there he did something he hadn't pictured that he could do. He was suddenly a millionaire in theory. He had $1.5 million in chips, but now it's, what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with this? How am I going to take care of this? So the crazy thing is, this guy had big brass ones. He went back to the Bellagio. And he would start going into the high stakes poker games. He would buy in with $100 bills from, oddly enough, the Suncoast robbery, because that's what he got cash from that. And then throughout the night, he would slip a few of the stolen $5,000 chips into his stack. The casino doesn't generally track who wins or loses at poker, so at the end of the night, the cashier of course would ask for his ID and his player's card, but he had absolutely zero trouble cashing out. So he'd be getting his butt kicked on the few thousand he bought in with, but he was cashing out with $5,000 chips. So he was able to pull this off because he was somewhat of a known quantity. He did have a player's card. He was a poker player. So even though the poker room was his best option to continue doing this, he got even crazier. A few nights later, he went to the craps pit and went to the exact same table that he robbed. Exact same table. He says that he found it very, very amusing sitting there playing and listening to people talking about this robbery and how it was done, whether they think they'll ever find that guy, so on and so forth. And to him, it was a thrill. It was fun. It was enjoyable. And he's throwing out these black chips, because he definitely had black chips. He's throwing out all these chips. He's making all these bets, and he started to become known to the casino, but not in the way of a robber, but in the way of a high roller, just enough to just get the attention of a host, and started getting comps and meals and rooms and show tickets and so on and so forth, and he loved it. He was eating it up. He was the big shot. This was the life that he'd wanted. He wanted to be the big shot. He wanted to be the gambler, the high roller. So that's what he did. He was living in a expensive suite in the hotel for a few nights, and just still managing to launder these chips, and it was just blowing money, thousands and tens of thousands of dollars on drugs and women. It's not hard to find women on the strip, especially if you have money. And he was getting his butt kicked, losing money, but he didn't care, because he's still walking up to the cashier and cashing out $20,000, $30,000. Didn't matter if he lost or not. He was still walking up there with chips and cashing them out. But there was one big problem. Over $1 million of the chips that he had picked up were $25,000 chips, also called cranberries. Those are tracked, and they're not easily convertible for anybody except a mega high roller. And he has not gambled enough to be in their system as somebody that could legitimately have multiple big chips. And he knew that. He knew that trying to cash out just even one of those cranberries was going to be a problem. So he held on to those and just used the rest of them. But the way he was living and spending and doing drugs and women and so on and so forth, it's like he thought that this was an inexhaustible supply of chips. And it just doesn't quite work that way. And he just kept losing, kept doing drugs. An old friend of his even flew in New Year's Eve to play with him, and has even said, you know, that Carleo was just sitting there playing $10,000 a hand, losing, getting his butt kicked with some woman that he brought in, and just looked sickly. Who knows when the last time he slept was? Who knows when the last time he ate was? He was just doing drugs and kept firing away. His buddy says that he probably lost 100 grand, but he doesn't know because they were all so high on drugs and pills. So nobody was really thinking right. Carleo estimates that he was snorting or smoking at least 640 milligrams, 80 milligram Oxycontin pills a day. Plus, he was also doing coke. Anytime he started nodding off at the tables, and his buddy says that he just looked horrible. He just looked terrible. And they even argued about it in the car on the way back to the airport. He was telling dude, you got to lay off the drugs. You're gonna die. You've got to chill out. You've got to lay off the drugs. And he did. He laid off a little bit. But he still had no idea what to do with these cranberries, with these $25,000 chips. There was nothing he could do. He couldn't think of anything he could do. Now the cops were confused because they're getting in all these tips. You know, hey, oh, the robber must have been my neighbor. Why do you say that? Well, because he owns a motorcycle. And that's it, he owns a motorcycle. It must have been him. It's not really helping the cops any. So even one of those Salvation Army bell ringers with little buckets tried to cash a $25,000 chip that somebody had dropped in their bucket. Now he was either unable or unwilling to identify the person. I got to figure that they're not really taking a mental snapshot of every single person that walks by and drops something into the bucket. So I tend to believe that he just couldn't give a description of the person. But then they meet a poker dealer. They have a poker dealer. I'm not going to say name at all. So it's a poker dealer at the Bellagio, and he told the cops that he knew who the robber was. And according to the cops, he was just another guy. He was just a guy from Jersey that reminded them of a very fast-talking character from Lethal Weapon. If that tells you anything, that's exactly who he reminded them of. And the poker dealer mentions that he was talking to somebody once, a player, that was talking about how they would love to just run over to the table and grab a whole bunch of those cranberries. And he says that this player was just broke, was struggling, but then a week later, he says he saw the same player, only now he is suddenly a high roller. He's got all this money, he's sitting in on games that he was never able to afford in his life prior to that. And he told the cops that this player's name, Tony Carleo. So this is when the dragnet is starting to close in. Now the cops at least have an idea of a name. They do some research. They find out he does have a motorcycle license, that he had declared bankruptcy, and that all of a sudden he started gambling big money. All of a sudden he's a high roller. And they even pull some records. Now here's an interesting statistic. So in the 4 years leading up to the robbery, Carleo had lost a total of $29,000 at the casino. Since the robbery, he lost $105,000. Cops put a trace on his phone. The only problem is, and the cops even say this, knowing who did it and being able to prove it, two wildly different things. But Carleo himself would help them. So it was Carleo himself that screwed himself over. He was already down thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars just a few weeks after within a week of the robbery, even though he's been staying at the Bellagio. He had a safety deposit box plus friends that he had stashed various chips with. So about the only time he was leaving the Bellagio that he had robbed was to go collect up more chips. But within a short amount of time, all he had left was just one $5,000 chip. And Carleo himself says he's emptying out this deposit box. He's thinking, man, he's a freaking idiot, because he still has all these $25,000 chips, but there's nothing he could do with them. He has not been able to figure out how he can handle them. So what got interesting was then he decided he's going to do a little research to try and figure this out. So he goes online, and on a poker forum, someone had actually started a thread devoted to his robbery, and there was this discussion going on how to get rid of those chips. And so Carly, of course, was following this discussion very, very closely, and he even went and joined it. And the funny thing is, his screen name he chose for himself was Ocean Spray 25. Cranberry, anybody? And he listed his location as Canada. So he wasn't exactly super clever with the puns, and he just couldn't resist. Clearly, he's a very narcissistic person as well. He was begging to be caught. So one day, a recreational player living in Virginia posted a hypothetical question. How many potentially worthless cranberries would you accept for a legit $5,000 chip? Almost instantly, Carleo started private messaging him, asking him, would you be willing to trade 4 $5,000 chips for 3 cranberries? And if more were possible, how many could you handle? How many would you be willing to do? And at first, Brooks didn't think he was serious and was just kind of dumbstruck by all this, and just amazed that the person who did the robbery would actually be on that forum. You know, it was so high profile, so famous at that time, to even believe that this could be happening. So in one of his messages, Carly even gave him a number to a disposable cell phone. He's smart enough at least to have a burner. So this player called him up, and just out of curiosity. And during the 15-minute call, he says that Carleo shared all these details. And Brooks asked for proof. This player's name was Brooks. Asked for proof. And after they got off the phone, Carleo went to his home computer and emailed Brooks a picture of 2 cranberries resting on a piece of paper signed Biker Bandit. What did Brooks do? He forwarded the photo of the Bellagio and the Las Vegas police. The IP address attached to that email from the house of Carleo's father, who, as we may have mentioned, was a judge. So a few days later, Carleo's at another casino, and he's playing in a poker tournament. And he was getting his butt kicked by the local pros around there, but his cards were going well, so he's managing to stay in. So he ends up at one of the breaks, and as he's about to head off to go get something to eat, someone that was right there watching kind of walks up to him and starts talking to him. Says he's a doctor and that he had heard that Carleo had some cranberries for sale. And Carleo says now that as soon as he heard that, he should have just run for the hills. Should have taken off to Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, Bora Bora, run into Triple X, anywhere. But strung out, drugs, gambling, women, drugs, more drugs, and not really drawing a connection between the person that he had contacted out of state and this person. He kept talking to him. And this person eventually introduced him to another person. And so this first person says he's a doctor, and he started gambling with Carleo. They would play a lot, gamble. He had cash, and asked to see. Carleo even asked to see the guy's ID, and the guy responded back with, "Can I see yours?" So he dropped that whole thing. But as they're gambling and all that, he starts to trust him. Because at first the doctor made it very quick offer. I'll give you 10 grand for one of the cranberries now. And he told me, hey, slow down, I don't even know you. So they just kept getting to know each other, and over time he gained his trust. He gained Carleo's trust. And he told Carleo that he owned a loan sharking operation back east. And eventually Carleo starts to trust him, and that's when things start going. So, a week or two later, this person slides Carleo a menu at a restaurant they were at, and inside of it was $10,000 in cash and small denomination chips. And Carleo took it and passed over one cranberry chip. And then over time, this continued. Carleo continues selling his new friend these cranberries. And then one day, early February, they meet up in the restroom of Bellagio, of course. It all seems to come back to the Bellagio. Carleo just could not stay away from there. And he hands over the cranberries and even gives him a bonus, says, hey, there's a couple extra in there for you. And he says that something changed in his friend's face. And his friend walked out of the bathroom, and seconds later, boom, half a dozen cops come bursting into the bathroom. They get him down on the ground, they cuff him, so on and so forth. So his new friend of his was actually a Las Vegas police officer. And the doctor and poker player, the one who had originally approached him and then introduced him to this new friend, was just a local casual poker player and friend of this cops, and he agreed to do this whole thing as a favor. Now the cop had earned a living as an undercover for an FBI investigation into a New York crime family, so he had some experience in this, while the other guy was just a friend. Just a friend, never got any kind of compensation for this in any way, shape, or form. He just helped out on this sting. All the money and chips that were used by this officer were actually supplied by Bellagio to him to continue this ruse. Now, this whole thing, of course, cost his father his judgeship when he was up for re-election. Of course, he was not re-elected, and Carleo was sentenced to 9 years in jail. I'm pretty sure, I haven't double-checked this, but he's got to have been released at this point. This happened in 2010. 2011 was when he was tried. So I'm going to assume that he's probably been released at this point. But see, the gambling bug never really left him. Even in later interviews, he talks about how in prison he's sports betting with stamps. That was the currency they were using at the time, just to continue to gamble, to scratch that itch. So it wouldn't surprise me if this is not the last time that the cops have heard the name of Tony Carleo, and it wouldn't surprise me if he comes up again at some point. And I hope you guys have enjoyed this, found this interesting. We appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye now.